Hello, everybody. I'm Larry Thoren, and I'm going to do three. I'm going to start with this poem. I was telling David earlier, if you put a gun to my head and said you have to burn all of your archives except, these would be the two I would hang on to. One from City of the Rain.
Tell us the story of
City of the Rain is Flagstaff, Arizona. Huff washing dishes at a restaurant. A dive of a restaurant, shall we say. And I've been thinking about, Huff was a relentless observer of the down and out. I mean, he didn't write about celebrities, he didn't write about politicians, he didn't write about movie stars. He wrote about people in wheelchairs, drunks, lost. This is called Beauty. Judy, you're so ugly it hurts to look at you, Claude Walker said, his weathered granite face cracking into a smile. That's your problem. Now what are we going to do about it? Christ, I think. Christ, I tried to think of something to say. Across the table, Judy's freckled, bony face twisted in shame. Claude was drunk as usual, and with a drunk's instinct for the truth of the moment, he had pegged what was up. Having explored the subject to his satisfaction, he rambled on, unaware of the havoc he had reaped. The night grew outside the branding iron cafe where I washed dishes. Judy filled in waiting tables, and Claude, old and mean, sat in his regular place. His day's work ended at the sawmill. Business was slow. Judy, skinny and freckled with stringy red hair and an expression that begged you to dislike her, had come to Flagstaff after her divorce and had no idea where she was going next. I liked her. We had gone out a couple of times after work. But I was nursing scars too, and it would take more than Judy to break me loose from my inwardness. I had come to Flagstaff from Austin, where too much had happened for a summer of forgetfulness. I knew no one outside of work. Claude's ramblings trailed into incoherence, and his head dropped onto his arms. I risked a glance at Judy. I think he's had it, I said. She smiled a strange smile. What should we do? Claude solved the problem by rearing up and saying, "Call me a cab." Judy hastened to obey. Ugly as sin, poor little thing, Claude mumbled, and his head dropped once more. The cab came, and between us we got him into it. Then Judy and I stood watching, very separate, as it drove off. Above us, the desert stars burned white and clear, distant, beautiful. Judy stared up at them for a moment, then dropped her head, turned quickly and walked inside. I stood on for a moment, feeling suddenly old and futile, and then followed her. This is a poem I wrote, and Huff's a character in it. Huff was such a generous man. I did this chapbook, I don't know when I did it, 1997 or something. I said, give me some art. So he did the art for this deal. There are none of these left. These are the galleys I found in my archives. And this is called Jimmy and the Runaway. We drove into town on a cold, hard wind. We were thinking of only passing through, but something put its hand on us, and we stopped at a dirty cafe sitting off the highway. Only a little bit ago, Jimmy was talking and lively while he drove, but when we got out of the car, he got quiet and looked around like he was spooked by the shadows. Inside, at the end of the counter, an old guy smoked and leaned toward the tired waitress stacking water glasses. We sat in a booth by the window. They looked our way, and she shuffled toward us. I put a quarter in the jukebox while Jimmy ordered the coffees. 3 tunes later, the old man looked right at me and aimed his smoke rings at the ceiling, then dropped his eyes to study the bones in the ashtray. I think Jimmy wanted to leave as bad as I did, but we sat a while longer, just the same. We didn't say anything. We watched the newspapers and ghosts blow across the road. I didn't want night to find us in that broken down cafe. I didn't want true darkness to fall on our car in the fading parking lot. And though I feared the roadside banshees common in that part of the country, I told Jimmy movement is always the best way to run. We left dollars on the table and headed out the door. From the corner of my eye, I saw the old man and the tired waitress turn to stone. The big motor coughed but fired, and we drove into the dusk past the outskirts, out past miles and miles of fields turned over for the winter. Things lifted, but sure enough, by and by, we heard laughter from between the plowed rows, and Jimmy and I, neither one said a word, and the night turned dark as a waiting earth. And this last poem is from Night Diner. Let me find it.
What year did he do Night Diner?
Night Diner is an aileron press. Those of you who know John, 1985. 1985. Well, damn, hang on a second. Let me. This is an odd, it's a strange book. There are just, some of it isn't even titled, and there's a thread running through it. You would think I would have marked the place of this thing. Journey West. Journey West. He knew there was peace at the top. That's why he climbed so hard, and there was peace at the top. He stood on the edge of the mesa, looking off across the distance at the blue and purple mountains, and something exploded in his chest, and he blew open and stood there while the great hole inside him filled, the air rushing into the vacuum, and he stood laughing and crying while the light poured into him till he grew still with it. And then he laid down on a hard, flat rock and slept with the sun blessing him. When he awoke, it was evening, and the wind had gotten cold, and he could feel how old the earth was here. And he knew that, much as he loved it, it was not home. This land had lived its time, and its time was not his. And so he began the long climb down, nostrils yearning already for the smell of city streets, needing the loneliness and the concrete battlements, and knew what he had not known before, that true peace never lies outside your particular destiny. There is no perfect way. There is only the way you have to go.
Yeah.